to shoot or not to shoot. For even the most seasoned police officer, it's the ultimate dilemma, a split-second choice that could prevent a violent crime or be a fatal mistake. But it's no longer just police who are deciding whether or not to pull the trigger. There's a new breed of laws that's expanding the rights of civilians to use deadly force. They are called the Castle Doctrine laws, and since 2005, they've been passed or proposed in more than 35 states. Where did this all begin? Like so many good stories, this one starts with a girl and a gun. The scene, a late-night encounter in this parking garage in downtown Tallahassee, 25 years ago.
One of the guys leaned out of the back window of the car, the back seat. He had a long neck beer bottle in his hand and proceeded to tell me what he was going to do with it when they caught me.
Marion Hammer says she was walking to her car after a long day at the office when she was accosted by a car full of men. But she had a surprise for them.
I stepped behind a big column and reached in my purse and pulled out my gun. And I stepped out and I drew the gun up through the headlights of the car and I aimed at the driver. And somebody in the car screamed, "The bitch got a gun."
The 69-year-old grandmother, who stands about 4'11", says the gun is the only thing that saved her that night. But a few weeks later, during an appearance with the local police chief on a TV talk show, she learned it also could have gotten her into trouble.
The police chief told me, well, in that situation, if you'd called the police, we'd have arrested you because you were the only one who employed the use of deadly force. And that made me angry because a 2,000-pound car and 6 drunk men, and they would have arrested me. When you are prosecuting law-abiding people for defending themselves against criminals, it's wrong and it has to be fixed. And the Castle Doctrine laws fix that.
As it happens, fixing laws is what Marion Hammer does best.
Single-handedly, she mounted a massive grassroots response.
In 1995, she became the first woman president of the National Rifle Association, as shown here in this promotional profile. After 30 years working Florida's capital, she's regarded by critics and admirers alike as a virtually unstoppable force.
And with the true skill of a marksman, shot down bill after bill.
In 1987, Hammer passed Florida's model right-to-carry law, allowing civilians to carry concealed weapons in public. But the parking lot encounter made Hammer realize staying safe was not just about a right to carry, but also about a right to self-defense. She says that right was being undermined by a provision in Florida law that said people attacked in public had a duty to retreat. In other words, they must try to escape before resorting to deadly force.
Through time in this country, what I like to call bleeding heart criminal coddlers want you to give a criminal an even break so that when you're attacked, you're supposed to turn around and run rather than standing your ground and protecting yourself and your family and your property. Started thinking then that the day will come when we will have to do some serious thinking about changing this. And that time came.
That time was 2005, as Florida was recovering from a series of brutal hurricane seasons.
In a lot of these devastated areas, law enforcement would tell communities, you're on your own, we can't get to you. So we needed to be sure that when people protected themselves, their families and their property, that they weren't going to be prosecuted by some criminal coddling prosecutor.
Hammer approached Florida lawmakers with a bill that would become the nation's first Castle Doctrine law.
People said, well, we already have those rights. I said, well, no, you don't. You think you do, but look at case law, read the newspaper, look at what's happening. And people would say, well, when did this happen? Well, it's like a creeping cancer that takes away your rights. You have a duty to retreat.
I know we have debated this.
The Castle Doctrine law sailed through the Florida legislature.
The law said civilians could shoot attackers without trying to escape first, and also required law enforcement to presume that shooters acted out of fear for their lives. The NRA's executive vice president, Wayne LaPierre, said Florida would be just the beginning.
I think this bill is going to sweep across the country because people want to be able to protect themselves, and they don't want to be second-guessed by what action they take at the scene of a crime.
That prediction proved prophetic. Jeannie Suk is a professor at Harvard Law School. She recently published the first scholarly analysis of the Castle Doctrine laws. Suk concluded that the legal trend started by Marion Hammer in Florida marks a radical shift in self-defense law from the original Castle Doctrine, which dates back to English common law.
If you were attacked, the traditional rule was that you had a duty to retreat before you actually killed. You had to try in some way to try to run away before, as a last resort, killing someone in self-defense. In the home, however, the rule was different. If you were in your home and someone was attacking you, you did not have to try to run away.
Therefore, in your castle, so to speak.
In your castle, exactly. A man's home is his castle. That was the traditional English maxim. And so English law had developed to have this idea that in the home, you did not have to try to flee if someone was trying to attack you there.
According to Suk, the traditional Castle Doctrine remained essentially unchanged from medieval times until 2005. That's when the new Castle Doctrine laws took the right to use deadly force in the home and expanded it to include cars, businesses, and in some states, anywhere a person has a right to be.
I can imagine when these laws were being debated, people said, let's pass this law because it makes people feel good, because it makes them feel like they are secure in their homes and they will never have to give in to criminals. But the thing is that there is an important change in this law. Even the traditional Castle Doctrine, which was very protective of people in their homes and allowed them to shoot in their home without retreating, it still meant that you had to be reasonably afraid of death or serious bodily harm. This was a very important requirement. You don't just let people kill in self-defense and say, oh, you were afraid of being attacked. You actually have to show that your fear was reasonable.
That's the way it was before.
That's the way it was. And now in these laws, you don't have to do that because you don't have to prove that in court. But more importantly, even before the trial stage, what happens is that police officers and prosecutors, it affects their decisions about whether to bring cases, whether to make arrests or to bring a prosecution. I think it's a very big deal. I think it's a really important change in the law.
What are the chances that these new Castle laws will at least be seen as giving individual citizens something akin to the right of a police officer when it comes to a gun?
It may be that the ordinary citizen in his home has a greater right to shoot in self-defense, to kill in self-defense, than just an ordinary police officer.
Well, do or do you not think some of it is people losing faith in law enforcement?
When you listen to what people say about these laws, that they're connected to an idea that if I had to rely on the police, I would be killed, right? There does seem to be an idea of loss of faith in law enforcement. But I can't explain why that would be at this point in time, given that we've seen a very, very steady and meaningful decline in violent crime.
If you've got it, watch it. If you don't, call your TV provider to get HDNet today.